All right, so I want to start this out with a disclaimer. As far as an English translation goes for this manga series, the current one that is completed isn't that great, and there are people working on making a better translation. So I was kind of hesitant to review this in its current state because, there's a lot that is just terrible about the current translation. Things like some characters being completely just their characterization is lost with the current scan. Um, some things like completely changed in meaning. Some things were even, from what I understand, just made up by the people translating it because they had no idea what the fuck was going on. So I felt kind of weird about reviewing this one so far, but what I kind of settled on doing is I'm just going to like kind of talk about some stuff just as like a base reaction, since I finished this not too long ago, and then I'll probably reread this when the latest translation is finished and I can finally read it how it was more so intended. Because while there is a lot of things I don't really feel like I can talk about, such as like characterization and stuff, there's a lot of just like writing things with this that even despite the poor translation, I think I can still talk about. Okay, just very briefly going over the premise. Part 5 stars Giorno Giovanna, who is pretty weird as far as JoJo's go because he's not. He is a JoJo, but he isn't. He's technically the son of Dio when Dio had taken over Jonathan's body, so. Well, I guess since it is Jonathan's body and Dio's just kind of the head, it is probably genetically Jonathan's child. Um, so he is a JoJo, but a very, very odd one at that. Very interesting as far as that goes. So Giorno lives in Italy and kind of had a rough childhood. He had a run in with a mobster when he was a child, and basically this mobster was nice to him. And ever since that incident, Giorno kind of had this dream of becoming a benevolent gangster or like a gangster superstar, which he calls a gangstar, which is completely ridiculous, and I love it. Um, and Basically, he gets involved with this stand using group uh, in the Mafia called Passione or Passion. I'm not entirely sure how that's pronounced, and I'm so sorry because I probably just butchered that. Anyway, so he joins the mob, and the mob is divided up into a bunch of different squads that each have their own sort of operation and job that they're supposed to do. And he joins Bruno's squad, and basically the entire series follows that squad of people in Giorno. And specifically, shortly after Giorno joins the squad, Bruno gets word from the boss of the gang that he wants his daughter safely escorted to the boss's location. That's kind of the basic premise of the at least the first half of the series. Then things kind of get more complicated from there. Part 5 feels really removed from the rest of JoJo's, which I guess can be both a good and a bad thing, but on one hand, it does let Araki do some stuff with this part that, I mean, you don't have to worry so much about continuity and making sure everything fits together, and you don't have to worry about previous characters complicating things. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of wasted potential. Specifically, Giorno being the son of Dio actually really isn't that important, and I thought that was just such a waste of, like, I don't know. I think that's just so fucking interesting as an idea to have this guy being both the son of Jonathan and Dio in a sense, and kind of inheriting personality traits from both because he's really kind-hearted, very passionate, but at the same time, when he wants to fight someone, he's fucking ruthless. And aside from that, they don't really explore it that much, and I thought that was really depressing. Um, but at the same time, too, you don't have too many recurring characters, which sometimes part 4 felt a little weird with that, where you kind of wanted to see less of the old characters because, I mean, they had whole parts dedicated to them, and you just kind of wanted to see more of the main cast. That's not really an issue here. Like, Koichi kind of is around for the first volume or so and then leaves, and then other than that, there's not too much. There is some stuff, but spoilers, so I don't want to say too much. Um, so making it feel so removed is both good and bad. But it does have this weird effect where you could probably read um, parts 1 through 4 and then just skip to part 6, and you probably won't have feel like you missed anything. Which I don't know, for the people that like this sort of thing as an overall arcing story, that probably will bother them. It doesn't bother me too much, but at the same time, sometimes it feels really weird how removed this is. But moving on, this part is really dark, and I know it's about the mafia, but it feels kind of weird. It might just be because I'm coming off of part 4, which is probably the most lighthearted part. And it's not to say that part 4 can't get serious in some places, and I mean all of the parts can, but like this gets pretty heavy some places. Like, I know they're gangsters, but like there's one point where they just straight up torture a guy, and I thought that was super unnecessary. Cause like I don't know, I've always viewed JoJo's as just this like dumb fun story thing, and that can sometimes get serious and emotional, but at the same time, like there are just points in this where there's just so much like gore associated with it that it's like it feels really unnecessary and kind of pointless. And I know it is like about gangs and stuff, so it's somewhat justified, but at the same time, it's like that's not really what I want from JoJo's, I guess. I guess what I'm trying to say is like it gets so caught up in being like violent and about this weird form of gang warfare that it kind of loses part of the charm that I felt with the other parts. That said, I really like the stand fights in this. They're really strong. I think part 3, a lot of the enemy stands were like had really destructive powers, and it was easy to see how they would be used for fights. And then part 4 was on the other end of the spectrum where stance had really specific uses, and it was really interesting to see how Araki would come up with like weird ways to make a fight scene work with these stands and their weird powers. And then part 5 is kind of like a halfway point where a lot of these stands are really destructive, but they're also really creative at the same time. I'd say probably uh, has some of the most interesting fight scenes from JoJo so far. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite fight scene wise. That still might be part 4, but they're really strongly written either way. If you read JoJo's just for like the dumb action bullshit and not for like character or story or art or anything, you'll probably like this a lot. Then I guess the only other real positive I have to say about Vento Oreo is that the art is really nice, but the rest of the review is just going to be me complaining about the writing, because I think part 5 is really, I guess it really shows just as a work a lot of Araki's weaknesses as a writer. Because there's a lot in this that is just really poorly written, and I can't say that some of the things I'm going to complain about weren't present in parts 1 through 4, but at the same time, I don't think they were as much as a problem as they are in part 5. So let me get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about right off the bat is that there are a few cases in this series where Araki just writes a character way too strong and then doesn't know how the fuck to deal with it, so he needs to pull something out of his ass. I guess I'm going to get more into spoiler territory for this part of the review too. So if you don't like that sort of thing, I guess you should probably avoid the rest of this. But yeah, Fugo and Diavolo, man, that was not great. So Fugo is one of the main squad members, right? And just Araki apparently could not write fight scenes around the guy because the stand was so fucking powerful, and he just wrote him out of the series, and like that is not great. It's really not good. And then King Crimson, I think King Crimson Araki himself just made up because he thought the power was cool and then had no fucking clue how the fuck that anyone was supposed to win against that, so he had to bullshit something. And to be fair, you could say the same thing about Dio. Jotaro really only wins because of a bullshit plot device reason at the end of part 3. Like, it's not the greatest written thing ever either, but at the same time, I feel like the Dio fight is just written so much more strongly. that it's more, you notice it right away with King Crimson, whereas with part three, I was so caught up in the moment and the hype of the whole situation that I was just so invested that I didn't care that the writing was bad. And then in part five, it's just so obvious that Araki had no clue what he was doing that it took me right out of it at the very end there, which was depressing. Um, I think the end of the series as a whole is actually kind of written poorly. Like I thought the Silver Chariot Requiem thing was kind of dumb. Uh, it kind of just comes out of nowhere. But then, other than the stand power thing and him not thinking things through, uh, Trish as a character just doesn't do anything for the majority of the story, and that really bothered me because like she's just kind of there, and she's probably one of like I'd say probably the third most important character, right after Giorno and Bruno. And like she doesn't do anything or really talk all that much even. Like she helps out a little bit and then finally she gets her stand. And even after she gets her stand, she doesn't really do that much, I don't think. Um I guess she helps out a lot towards the end, but really for the majority of the plot of part 5, you could replace her with like a bag of money or like a family heirloom or something, and the plot would be pretty much the same. She's just kind of there, and like I thought that was a lot of wasted potential too. And then the last thing I guess I really want to talk about, and this I feel rather mixed on actually. I don't think it's really bad, but I don't think it's great either. A lot of people say that Giorno's a boring protagonist, and I think part of that is actually just the translation, so I don't want to say too much on that. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that say, well, if you really look at it, the hero of the story is Bruno, not Giorno. And I guess I can kind of see that, yeah, like kind of in a sort of like Lord of the Rings sense. Like Giorno is kind of the Frodo of the story. He's the supporting man. He's kind of he has like a leading role, but he's more in the back of things. He's not up front. He's not the person taking charge. But at the same time, it really doesn't feel like Giorno gets much time to himself. He doesn't feel super fleshed out compared to Josuke or maybe not Jotaro, but compared to other protagonists, Giorno feels a little flat. Not just like not as like a character, like not even talking the dialogue, but just the amount of time spent on him in the series. It's not much, and I didn't really think that was great. Bruno is a pretty interesting guy, it seems, though. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into it because this is more on the translation and not the actual series itself, but like you get the one flashback with Giorno where it kind of explains where his ideals come from, and then after that, it's really it. And you don't really get much more out of him, and he doesn't really have much of an arc, I guess, either as far as the series goes. He just kind of does things and fights, and I didn't really care much for that decision on Araki's part. And like I said before, I thought he could. He had a lot of potential with the Dio thing going on, and it just nothing comes out of it, and I think that's really disappointing. So yeah, I can't really say I liked Vento Oreo all that much. I don't even really think it's terrible, but I definitely did not have a positive reaction to it. I'm really, really hoping that once the good translation is finally completed and I go back and read it, that I like the characters so much that I just don't give a shit about the other issues that I've seen with it so far. Because I feel like I said before, even without the bad translation, I think the things I just listed are still problems. Uh, like just within the work as a whole. But I'm really hoping that the good translation makes me like the cast more, and maybe that will redeem the series when I go back and go through it again properly. But yeah, it's probably my least favorite part so far. That said, I think I like Phantom Blood more than most people do, so take that with a grain of salt. So, like, right now, I think my part ranking is something like 2, 4, 3, 1, then this. Uh, I'm going on a road trip soon, and I just kind of plan on marathoning Stone Ocean whenever I have downtime and that. So, maybe in like a month or two, I'll have a review out for that. Maybe not. When I make a promise, just expect me to not deliver because I'm fucking slow going through media. You guys probably know that already. But yeah, I have a few Gundam reviews that I want to do too, so those will probably be going up in a day or two. But other than that, yeah, that was my Vento Aureo review. See you, everyone.